Om Shri Sairam. We will start today's session with three Omkars. Offering our loving pranams at Bhagwan's lotus feet, respected elders, brothers and sisters, Sairam, and welcome to the 26th edition of Online Samarpan organized by Sai students of Mumbai. It's indeed a blessed day. It's Diwali. We've just concluded the Akhand Bhajan for 24 hours. Who would have thought we would have had Akhand Bhajan in such a unique and beautiful way, where we get to sing along with singers from Parthi and have live darshan. It's indeed a rare opportunity that has been bestowed to us by Bhagwan, and I think we are uh, we are in his debt for having us participate in the Akhand Bhajan. And it's indeed a beautiful day, so we are continuing it in the same way, and we continue this bliss by having our 26th edition of Online Samarpan. Bhagwan has blessed us with brother Balram Chandran, lovingly known as BRC. It's a hostel lingo, and we know him as brother BRC, who will share his experiences with Bhagwan. Brother BRC hails from Thrissur. He has been singing bhajan since the age of 15. He joined Bhagwan's Institute in the year 1994 and completed his MFM in 1999 and was blessed with gold medal from the Divine Hands in 1999. He is a wonderful singer. Personally, we have learnt a lot from him in the bhajan group. Some bhajans are trademark. I mean, Antaranga Sai is something which we are used to hearing only from brother BRC. He's a superb singer. He has sung in front of Bhagwan on numerous occasions. He's an exceptional speaker, has spoken in several forums across the world. He is also part of the Sundaram Bhajan group, and is also part of the Samarpan organizing team from Chennai. So over to brother BRC and take us through this blissful evening. Sairam, brother.
Brother Jayashankar, Sairam, thank you so much for the loving words. Tvameva mata cha pita tvameva tvameva bandhuscha saka tvameva त्वमेव विद्या द्रविणं त्वमेव त्वमेव सर्वं मम देव देवा त्वमेव सर्वं Shri Sai Deva. Dear Swami, loving pranams at your lotus feet. Respected elders, dear brothers and sisters, Sairam to all of you. Grateful to our brothers and Bhagwan for this wonderful opportunity. This is something which I have been craving for, praying for. And I'm so glad that Swami has bestowed this opportunity upon me. I must in fact start with a preamble. And to lead to the preamble, I must narrate a beautiful experience which happened in Bhagwan's presence, if I remember right, in Trey Vrindavan. It was one of those days when Bhagwan materialized something very special by his own standards, high standards, I must say. Now, what he materialized that day was a beautiful looking jewel, and this jewel was no ordinary jewel. it was a jewel which we refer to as either the Chudamani or the Shikhamani. This is the divine jewel which Mother Sita wore on her hair. So Swami materializes the Shikhamani or Chudamani, and then what Swami does is to kind of pass it around for people to see. Now this is Sita's Shikhamani, and people come rushing forward. Each one of them touch the Shikhamani very reverentially, and then, touch their hands to the eye in an act of great reverence. And this continued. Bhagwan was very amused with the entire response of the students in front of him. And after everybody had, reverentially, bowed down before the Shikhamani, Bhagwan, with a beautiful smile on his face, said, "Hey, you are doing this to the creation, but you must be actually doing this to the hand from which came this creation." Now, dear brothers and sisters, I share this because when I was thinking about this opportunity which I've got, and while I was preparing for this Samarpan talk, it occurred to me that as a Samarpan speaker, I run a significant risk. The significant risk is because as part of Samarpan, you're expected to share your experiences with Bhagwan. And in your attempt to do that, it's quite natural that the narration becomes very autobiographical. And when the narration becomes very autobiographical, what happens is, despite your best intentions, I realize that you run the risk of focusing the attention on the narrator and the narrative, while your actual intent is to focus on the one whose leelas are being narrated. And that's a significant risk, I think, which any Samarpan speaker runs. In fact, my prayer to Bhagwan is that this Samarpan talk must become what Professor Kasturi describes in his inimitable words as one of his lines. He says that it's about feeling the touch of the one in the play of the many. The touch of the one in the play of the many can't be described more appropriately. The touch of the one and the only one, the one who is the only one for us, the only one who matters for us, the only one who exists for us, the only one who is the center of our life for us, Bhagwan, is felt in the life, in the play of the many. And this play is actually his own play. It's just that we believe it's ours. And Swami, my prayer to you today is that all throughout, may the narrative be forgotten. May the narration be forgotten. In fact, I'd be the happiest if at the end of this Samarpan, at the end of this 1 hour, people don't remember me, people don't remember what I narrated, but people only remember the one whose Leela is being narrated, the touch of the one in the play of the many. And that's my prayer to you, Swami. And Swami, as part of my effort to move towards this direction where only you would be remembered and not the narrator or the narration, I was just thinking that, I will just junk all chronology. Because when you talk about, your own experiences with Bhagwan, you're talking about history. But to ensure that it doesn't become my history, but actually becomes his story all throughout, what I thought I'll do is I will talk about the main theme of whatever I have experienced by his grace. To sum it up, there are many ways of looking at my own experiences, but today I thought I'll look at it through the kaleidoscope of one powerful concept, which I will not say I have learned. I'll have to use the present continuous here. I'll say one powerful concept which I am learning, and that is about prayer. Talking about prayer, I'd like to look at all these experiences through this lens, and I'd like to, with Bhagwan's grace, talk about, divide the talk into 4 parts. The first part is I'd like to talk about the one who is the object, who is the recipient, who is the receiver of all our prayers, the destination of all our prayers. In fact, maybe it's wrong to say recipient. I think we should say destination, because Swami often reminds us that the Lord never receives, he always gives. So I think I should say the Lord who is the destination of all our prayers. Not that the Lord needs any introduction to any of us here, but it's just that he's so amazing that each time you speak about him, there's a wonderful facet that comes. And like the brilliant sun, which is reflected on everything, on every water body, I think today, as a small water body, I'll also reflect the splendor of that beautiful sun. The second is, I thought I'll speak about the power of prayer. Again, I know I'm trying to sing to the choir here by talking about the power of prayer, but it's just that any number of times you speak about the power of prayer, it's amazing. And I am cognizant of the fact that I'm the first listener to whatever I say and the first beneficiary of whatever I say. And hence, this is to remind myself about the power of prayer. The third thing I thought I will speak about is the purpose of prayer. And this is again culled out from my own experiences with Bhagwan. And the fourth is about the process of prayer. So I'll start with the object, our object of our prayer, then talk about the power of prayer, then the purpose of prayer, and then the process of prayer. And I'll try and pack all my experiences into these four categories so that at the end of 1 hour, it is not an autobiographical narration. It is not history. It is purely his story. What do you talk about the object of our prayer? Our Swami, in fact, the Purusha Sukta says, Padosya Vishwa Bhutani Tripadasya Divi. It is said that with just 1/4 of him, the entire cosmos is manifested, while 3/4 is still unmanifested, and we are still trying to figure out the 1/4. So what do you talk about? That object of prayer. But let me make an attempt here. Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa says that the object of our prayer, the one who is the person who listens to all our prayers, he's somebody who listens to everything. He says the Lord listens to everything. He hears even a footfall of an ant. So there were wonderful experiences through which Bhagwan evidenced that this is very, very real. Let me start with the first one which comes to mind. And this happened to my mother, who happens to be sitting right to my side while I'm narrating this experience. This happened even when we had not even got the opportunity to see Bhagwan physically. If I remember right, the year must have been 1992, if I remember correctly. We were about to go to Prashantanilayam for the very first time. I had been selected by the Kerala Bhajan group to sing in Bhagwan's presence. So you're just lucky. The first time you're going to see Bhagwan, you're part of the Kerala Bhajan group and you're getting an opportunity to sing. Your number is 23rd. Not sure whether the Bhajan will come, but nevertheless, the Bhajan, I was in the list. What I did not know, that there was one person secretly at home who with all heart was praying to her favorite deity, Lord Hanuman, that I should not get an opportunity to sing in Prashantanilayam, and that was my mother. Why is this? Because for some reason, she was not very comfortable with the very idea of Swami. Now, I must tell you that when this entire experience happened, we did not know this. She kept it a secret because if she had made a public declaration of it, she would have no longer belonged to the family. And thus, she had to keep it a secret. Now, my mother had gone through a surgery when she was very, very young. Her uterus had been removed. And around the time this experience happened, she had developed a cyst in her ovary. A scan was done. They had figured out the dimensions of the cyst. In fact, they said that it's almost the size of an orange, and we still have the medical records. So it was almost decided, people were in two minds that we should actually do a surgery, but then they said, okay, let's try other things, before we actually do this. It was one of those Sunday evenings where my father had decided that the entire family should go for bhajans. My mother was naturally not very excited about the idea, and she protested. She gave different reasons, except the actual one, the fact that she was not comfortable with Swami. And she said she can't come to the bhajan. 100 excuses were surfaced, and my father, with a wave of his hand, swept away all those excuses. And we found ourselves in the Samiti attending the bhajans. This is the Trishur Samiti that I'm speaking about. The bhajans were in progress, and while the bhajans, if I remember right, the bhajan which was being sung was Dasharatha Nandana Rama, Daya Sagara Rama. My mother must have been sitting praying all throughout to her favorite deity Hanuman, that I should not get an opportunity to sing in Prasanthi Nilayam. Poor thing, little did she know that the very Hanuman whom she was praying to, the master was busy vetoing it, and Hanuman would definitely not cross the master's line. But exactly at that point of time, mother experiences terrible pain in her stomach, a terrible, terrible pain, inexplicable pain, so much so that she's not able to speak, she's not able to move, she's barely able to breathe. And when the bhajans got over, she just, took the key of the car and walked in, and then opened the car and just sat down, and she wasn't speaking for some time. When we got back into the car, mother said, I had a real terrible pain. I don't know what happened to me when we were sitting in the Samiti. Well, I don't remember this, but mother says that immediately, spontaneously, I told her saying, Mother, your cyst has gone. Now, I don't remember this, but mother clearly remember this. And naturally, she must have dismissed this thought as, some misplaced optimism, on the side of a person who's not even become, an adult, was still an adolescent. The next day I go to school, I come back from school and I find that mother's not at home. Mother's gone to the hospital. Mother's gone for a checkup, and the doctor suddenly decides that we must do a laparoscopy. And she's, rushed into the chamber, and she is given anesthesia. And we rush to the hospital to see her. And as we rush to the hospital to see her, now these are all of family doctors, this hospital is a hospital where, a lot of our own family members were born, and doctors are very well known. We find the main doctor, the doctor was attending on her, rush out, and then one more doctor come in, and then a third doctor joins. Now, when you have multiple doctors joining in, the first thing that you're thinking is something is seriously gone wrong. And that's exactly what we were thinking. But as we were wondering what it is, the entire group of doctors came together, they spoke to us, and they said, this is something we just can't believe, because the cyst which we saw in the scan is missing. And the interesting part is that there was a scar as though it was freshly operated upon. Now, mother was under the influence of anesthesia. When she came, her eyes opened, all tears in her eyes, and then she narrates her part of the story, which is actually not her story. And you'll realize why I'm saying that in a moment from now. She says that the anesthetist was right next to her and held on to her hand, and she was chanting the name of Lord Rama. Rama was perfectly acceptable. Only adding Sai to it was a problem. So she had got till there. So Hanuman and Rama. And then what happens is that she's chanting Lord Rama's name, and the anesthetist is asking, are you worried? And she says, no, I'm not worried. And immediately what happened is, at that point of time, the anesthetist is no longer visible, but holding a hand in the place of the anesthetist is a very familiar looking figure for all of us, with his afro hairstyle and then saffron robe. It was Bhagwan standing. There's absolutely no reason why she would imagine Bhagwan, because that's one form she does not want to see at that point of time. But it's Bhagwan chanting, and Swami is saying, why fear when I'm here? And immediately the Ram gets a prefix, and unknowingly she stands chanting Sai Ram for the first time in her life. And the rest, like they say, and they don't say, is not history, but his story. And that was the beginning of his story. Many years before, in the 1950s, when my grandfather, along with his brothers, had walked into a Prasanthi Nilayam, not knowing where they were walking in, they were taken by a business connect of theirs. They slept on the first floor of a cowshed without realizing where they were sleeping. And when they were ushered into Prasanthi Nilayam and Swami blessed them with an interview, Swami promised to them that he would one day come home. We didn't realize that this was how he was coming home. But talking about the object of prayer, what I learned from this experience is that here is an object of prayer who does not respond to just his so-called devotees. Because here was somebody who was positively against him. I know that sounds like an oxymoron, but she was positively against him. And Swami responds to her voluntarily. We have not even seen Bhagwan. And we, in fact, in a few days from then, for the first time, we went to see Bhagwan. So here was somebody whom we had not even seen, we had not even experienced, and he had mercifully responded. So then I realized that the person who's the object of our prayer is very special, and for him, the entire cosmos he would respond to. Like Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa says, he listens to everything. He listens to even the footfall of an ant. Before I knew, I was in Bhagwan's college by his grace, studying in the Brindavan campus. And if I remember right, when this experience happened, I must have been in room C6. And I'm specifically mentioning this because some of our brethren here will have fond memories. There was this boy who was one of my roommates. He, in fact, was one of those boys who had done 108 circumambulations, pradakshina to the Ganesha in East Prashanti Gate, because Ganesha is the liaison officer for all admission. You know, that's where brothers would do all their pradakshina to actually get admission. But the interesting part is that he was possibly the only person in the history of Sri Satya Sai Institute of Higher Learning who must have done 108 circumambulations praying to Ganesha that he not be admitted into Sri Satya Sai Institute of Higher Learning, because he was there by sheer force. But you know, like Hanuman, Ganesha also ignores the prayers and he gets selected and he becomes part of the institute. But then after he joined the institute, it was only a matter of time before, you know, he was completely into Bhagwan. He had lost his mother at a very young age and he was brought up by his father and his sisters. So what happened is, one of those days, this brother had gone for a bath and for a long time he'd not come back. And we were wondering what happened. After some time, we got worried because we know that he once in a while would get epilepsy, you know, he would get fits. And thus we were very concerned for him. And then we, you know, kind of rushed to the bathroom where we thought he is. And we kind of knocked there and suddenly realized he wasn't responding, got really worried. And finally, we had to break open the door. And when we broke open the door, we found that he was actually unconscious. And we didn't know how long he was unconscious. We picked him up, got him to the room, he got medical attention, he was fine, and all that happened. Now, this brother happens to be from Kerala, you know, which is my home state. Now, I am from Kerala, but my ancestors migrated from Tamil Nadu, so I also understand Tamil as a language. So a couple of days later, we are in Sri Vrindavan, and we are sitting in Bhagwan's presence, and as per his will, it happens that this brother and I are seated right in front of the Jula. Bhagwan comes, sits on the Jula. This is the Sri Vrindavan. He leans forward and speaks in Tamil. And since it's Tamil, I'm able to pick it up. But he's actually speaking not to me, but he's actually speaking to this brother. But this brother doesn't understand Tamil. But here is a translator waiting and on all ready and position. So I had this divine opportunity. So I was made a part of this experience. Swami just leans forward, and I'll try and recollect almost verbatim what Bhagwan said. What Bhagwan actually said that day is this. He said, "Ongata vandu paisa illena Swami kitta solla kudada. Ongata vandu marundu vaanga paisa illena Swami kitta solla kudada. Swami vandu kudukka matena." And what he actually said, I'll translate it for you. He says, if you don't have money to buy medicines, can you not tell Swami? Can you not ask Swami? Will Swami not give you the money? And our man, my classmate, is blissfully smiling, thinking Swami is talking about some Upanishad. But then Swami is in Tamil, you know, Tamil saying this. And I look at him in a state of shock, and he doesn't understand why I gave him that look. And then Trey session gets over. And I know the background because I'm his roommate. And then this happened to him. I put 1 and 1 together. And the moment he rushed out of 3, I chase him and I catch hold of him and I tell him, never call us your brother in the future. Don't call me your brother. And I have this reputation of being mild-mannered. So he was wondering why I was in a very different avatar that day. And he said, no, but why are you talking to me this way? He said, you know, you did not have money to buy medicines. You missed your regular medicines, and that's why you got fits. And the moment I said that, this brother was looking upon me as though I was actually omniscient and omnipresent and omnipotent, and he was wondering. He said, brother, how did you know? And then I said, relax, I don't know. I said, that's exactly what Swami was saying. And then he broke down. Dear brothers and sisters, he just broke down because that was exactly the reason why he'd got fits. He had stopped. He was actually shy to ask any one of us. In fact, every time I listen to this, I'm, dear listener, I'm amazed. And let me kind of refocus you. We are not talking about my historical facts and my narrative here. We are talking about, whom are we praying to? We're praying to this wonderful, wonderful Lord. And what is wonderful about, here is the fact that, how the Lord listens to everything, even the footfall of an ant. And why is that amazing? it is amazing, I believe, because here is the Lord who has to run the entire cosmos, and still the Lord has the ability to listen to the footfall of an ant who did not actually have the money to buy medicines. And every time I think of this episode, the the part of the bhajan which comes to my mind is this, and I feel like singing this, and I think I should sing this here. He Tribhuvan Palini Ma, He Trishuladharini Ma. It's like saying, He Tribhuvana Palini Ma, He Trishuladharini Ma. Mother, you are actually the person who has to take care of the entire cosmos. Tribhuvana actually, summarizes the entire cosmos. Not just that, Trishula Dharinima, because she also controls, Trishula stands for all power. It stands for the 3 dimensions of time. She is the person who is the Lord and Master of everything. He Tribhuvana Palini Ma, He Trishuladharini Ma, Jayama, Jayama, Jayama. It's almost like, you're saying, Mother, my mother is actually very big. She is actually the Lord of the entire cosmos. She controls the 3 dimensions of time, but still, at the end of the day, Jayama, Jayama, Jayama. She's my own mother. Jagadishwari Saima. Swami, you may be very big, but when I really need you, you are my mother and you're my mother alone. So this wonderful, wonderful, wonderful Divine Mother who is the object of our prayers, and that is what I experienced through this wonderful experience which Bhagwan through his mercy made me a part of. There was one more interesting dimension which came out through a different experience of this object of prayer. Yes, we realized he truly, truly listens to everything. Now, here was an occasion where not 1 ant, but 3 ants, figuratively, were huddled together in the dining hall of the Brindavan hostel, the dining hall which also doubled up as a prayer hall at Bhajan hall and thus at Bhagwan's photo. We were supposed to be doing combined studies, but what actually happened was there was one of those ants which was very proudly declaring his sense of rebellion, because this was one more ant who was, was my classmate in my school days, had joined Swami's institute purely because of parental pressure, was totally rebelling against it at heart, and actually had picked up, some not so beneficial habits when he was in school, including smoking. And what he would do is, to show his sense of rebellion when he joined Brindavan Ashram, he had actually managed to slip out of the gates, and Bhagwan was there. This was the year when Sai Kulwant Hall was being constructed, so it was 1994. He had slipped out of the gates, and purely as an act of rebellion, had smoked and came back. And this ant was actually talking to us in the evening, saying, you talk about this hostel and discipline and all that. I went out and smoked, and was saying this with a lot of evident pride. I was one of the other ants, and I was very worried for him. And I immediately told him, I said, brother, you need to be careful. I mean, if somebody finds out, it's going to be a problem. And he immediately, spontaneously, he said, nobody will find out. Okay, nobody can find out. The warden will not know. The teachers will not know. But then I said, but Swami will know. And then this ant decides to throw an open challenge. The challenge is saying, let Swami tell me not to smoke and I will stop smoking. And he was confident supremely that Swami would never know. How would Swami know? It was a very unfavorable God to students ratio. I mean, only one God and you have 300 students on the other side. So very unfavorable. How would this happen? Can't happen. So what happens is, I don't remember, it was the next day or 2 days later, but then we were all in the same line in the hostel where they took tokens. Okay, that was again divine will. And that line goes in first. And the 3 ants are happily sitting in front of Bhagwan. This time we've got 1 more, 2, this time we've got 3 ants. Bhagwan walks in and the usual Trey session happens. Bhagwan gives a discourse, all that happens, and finally the Aarti has to be lit. And students would be given, opportunities by rotation to actually, offer Aarti to Bhagwan. Now this particular ant the one who had decided to smoke as an act of rebellion, was not having any Aarti chants that day, just happened to be in the front. So what Bhagwan does is he lights the Aarti, and like some of our brothers here would know, one custom which Bhagwan had always built was to give that matchbox to the boy who lights the Aarti, because it's a wonderful memento that you can keep. But that day, Bhagwan decides to, override tradition and custom, and what he does is to light this matchbox. Does not give it to the boy who is supposed to get it, designated boy who's doing the Aarti. Turns around to, this particular brother of mine who had been busy smoking, throws the matchbox at him, and naturally, this brother caught hold of the matchbox. And before he could react, Swami looks at him and with a beautiful smile on his face says, "Hey, I've given you a matchbox, but please don't use it for smoking." And there was stunned silence among those three ants, but everybody else is laughing. The most interesting fact is even the warden is laughing because everybody is thinking Swami is joking. Now, the only three people who knew it was not a joke was us. And this was amazing. It is one thing, brothers and sisters, to read about Bhagwan's omniscience in a book, but it is something very different to actually experience it live. So here is once again that Lord who listens to everything, and that means the next time you're in front of his photo, it's not just a photo. Your next time in front of his chair, you think it's an empty chair. You know that it is not an empty chair. So a Bhagwan who need not be physically present, but still will listen to the prayers, will listen to the ant. So that was the next experience, which convinced me that we have somebody who has an object of prayer is very, very, very special. One more thing I realized about this wonderful object of our prayer, Bhagwan, is that he knows the prayer even before the prayer actually gets formed in our mind. I think he just listens to it because we can have the joy of praying, and so that we can feel that we have put in our bit of effort. This is an amusing experience, but I must still share it because I think the one lesson is wonderful. So here was a classmate of mine. I think this was again 1994 or 95. And like I said, Bhagwan was there for full 6 months. Sai Kulwant Hall was being constructed. And this brother wanted to give a letter to Bhagwan. He wanted to offer a prayer, and then he would desperately try giving the letter. Now, in those days, I know law of probability doesn't really work with Bhagwan, but even going by our a normal understanding of law of probability, in those days, the access to Bhagwan physically was so much that you try for at least 10, 15 darshan sessions, Swami would pick up your letter. But somehow this brother tried for months at end. And he tried various things and Bhagwan was not picking up his letter. Swami was even rubbing it in by picking up the letter on this side, on that side, on this side, antane, jintane, ventane, continue in a different sense, but except his, this particular letter. And finally, what happened is that this brother came to a conclusion saying that something must be seriously wrong with my letter. That's why Bhagwan is not picking it up. Now, normally you write a letter to Bhagwan, you don't kind of open it again. But here, these were special circumstances and warranted extreme measures. So sitting in his room one day, he prayed to Bhagwan and said, Swami, I'm going to open this letter and see what's actually in this. There must be something seriously wrong. And that's why you're not accepting it. So he opens the envelope, he picks out the letter, opens the letter, and discovers that it was actually no letter. It was, dear brothers and sisters, it was his accountancy answer sheet. So he'd actually written a letter to Bhagwan. He wanted to put it into the envelope, but because of some confusion, the actual letter which he had written to Bhagwan was actually still in his hostel cupboard. What he had put in by mistake was his accountancy answer sheet, and that's what he was carrying to Darshan for almost a month at stretch. And that day he put the right contents in, and lo and behold, Swami picked it up immediately. It was amazing because as an experience, it was so beautiful. And I was his roommate. So I had the opportunity to hear this directly from him and was thus a part of that experience. So here is a Swami who already knows what prayer you're going to actually come out with. Not just a Lord who will listen to the footfall of an ant, the Lord who already knows what is going to originate in this little head of the ant. Before I move on to the next part, where we talk about the power of prayer, let me talk about one more thing of our object of prayer, Bhagwan. Now, this is one of the most unbelievable experiences I've ever had. And I would say, in a sense, one of the most transformational experiences. This is after my student period. I had landed in Prashantinilayam, had, just kind of come, and then it was evening darshan time, and Swami would just about come. So you've just come, quickly have a wash, and you want to rush to the mandir because you don't want to miss the evening darshan. So exactly as I rushed in, and many of us, I'm sure, have been to Prashantinilayam. I would invite you to visualize along with me the Sai Kulwant Hall and request you to visualize the place, the car shed and where the old students sit. And that's where, I had gone and I was sitting they were not very crowded. So I was sitting somewhere in the front row. Bhagwan came out for darshan, and those were the days, the walkie-talkie days, as we say, where he would walk and talk. And he was walking around. And if you remember, exactly opposite to, the car shed area, there is a pillar. And Swami was exactly in front of that pillar. And I would request you to visualize this along with me. And I was sitting bang opposite to the pillar. Bhagwan just came, and Swami's right hand was in the pillar. Those were the days he would kind of walk slowly, but still on his own. And as he was turning the pillar, he was just looking sideways, and then he made eye contact. No, brothers, just think about it. How much time does it take for Bhagwan to just, kind of do that? I know he glides around very gently, but then it doesn't take too much time. But there was something inexplicable which happened. Remember, I had just rushed in. I was not in some great spiritual mood and done, long sadhana, namasmarana, unlike Brother Jaishankar, who has had, a whole day of bhajans, and he's sitting and he confessed that he's hearing only bhajans even as we speak. So I was definitely not in that state. But what actually happened is that suddenly there were a set of questions and answers which kind of started getting downloaded in the mind. The most beautiful thing is the questions were all questions on starting with the law of karma, right up to many things we typically have as doubts in our mind: free will versus divine will, law of karma. And there were questions which were getting formed in our mind, and the answers were lines from Swami's discourses, but appropriately arranged. It was like a question and an answer, a question and an answer, a question and an answer. And it was as though a file was getting downloaded, and all this is happening just as Swami kind of turns. And it all ended with a voice which I hear from within, which says, I am you, I am you, I am you. And then there is a deluge of tears. And for the next few minutes, I can't speak. I was definitely not in a great spiritual mood or doing sadhana or doing japa when I got in there. It was just the glance of the Lord. What I'm thinking is, look at the power of the Lord, the object of our prayer, how powerful the object of our prayer is. Not that, any of you require convincing on this, but like I said, like the splendor of the sun gets reflected in many a water body. To the best of my understanding, I'm a very muddied water body. But the splendor of the Lord is so beautiful that even in this muddied water body, he just touches it. No, it's like saying, it's like, a girl, a Devadasi girl once sang, when she knew that Swami Vivekananda was not going to come and attend her dance because she's a Devadasi girl. She sings that night saying, "Oh Lord, look not upon my faults. There is a piece of iron in the idol in the temple. There is a piece of iron in the thief's dagger, but both of them, when touched by the philosopher's stone, turn equally into gold." Swami, how does it matter what I am? It doesn't matter, Swami, because you are the philosopher's stone. And because you have touched our lives, we can be redeemed. So, I just couldn't, I don't know, I guess I went a bit off track, but just couldn't resist mentioning that. But that is the beauty of the Lord. Let me move on to the next part of what I have to say. It's about the power of prayer. So many things we can speak about, but experientially, I learned it through the experience of my own brother who happened to be studying in Prashantinilayam when I was also doing my post-graduation there. One of his toughest subjects were accountancy. And we had a teacher who was very well-meaning, would teach very well, but somehow he never figured out accountancy. And there are some brothers who already know because they have been students. So his prowess or lack of prowess in accountancy was so big that the only way he could pass the accounts exam was by actually mugging up problems. And can you actually mug up problems in accountancy? Because it's like mathematics, but he would do that. I would do my bit by sitting with him after darshan hours in front of the school hostel and try and teach him accountancy, but it really, really didn't work. in the model exam, just before the final exams of the 12th standard final exams, he actually failed. And the accountancy teacher walked up to him and said, see, Babu, Swami's school has always got 100% results. Okay. You don't spoil the school's name. And now he felt terrible because one is he's not able to figure out accountancy. And second is upon his shoulders is the burden of not spoiling the name of the school. And I still remember he would pray extremely hard. He would get up at 2:30 in the morning. He would mug up accountancy problems, but all that he could do is mug up. Then came the CBSE exam. He saw the question paper and he found that the first question for 4 marks was something he knew. And dear brothers and sisters, when I say something he knew, what it actually means is that he had by-hearted it. It's sheer coincidence that the exact problem had come, So he looked at that problem and he wrote down the answer. He underlined with blue and red and all that because he had lots of time on hand. The reason why he had lots of time on hand is because he realized in a glance that the other 96 marks, he knew absolutely nothing. He had absolutely no chance. He attempts every question, including the choice questions. People who have lots of time on the hand can indulge in all those adventures. So he did all of that. And, you have that trial balance, which is supposed to tally both sides. The trial balance didn't tally. So he resorted to the age-old method, which many students have used, which is to put the same total on both sides and hope that somebody wouldn't do the totaling to figure out that it actually doesn't tally. He knew he had absolutely no chance. He came back to the hostel, didn't want to discuss the answers because he knew that the result would be out immediately. And then he would get admission in Vrindavan and then all that wouldn't matter because he had failed 12th standard. But the topper in the school was actually in his room. And they all started discussing the paper. He got sucked into the discussion. And within a matter of 10 minutes, his worst beliefs were validated. And the fact was that only the 4 marks was right. The entire 96 had gone for a toss. And he knew he had absolutely no chance. He got admission in Vrindavan. He passed the entrance test. And that year, he decided to go early. And we were trying to figure out why he wanted to go early. Naturally, he did not tell us any of this. He just went early. In his mind, he was thinking that these were his last few days in Bhagwan's divine presence as a student, and he wanted to make the most of it. I think it was Chinese New Year. And Bhagwan had come to the Kalyana Mandapam in Vrindavan and was watching, was watching the drama put up by the devotees from China. And he had got, a seat right next to Bhagwan's chair. And Swami came, sat down, and just before that, there was a rumor spreading that the 12th standard results were put up on the notice board. Now, that's not something you want to hear at that point of time. Bhagwan comes, Bhagwan sits, and Bhagwan sits there for a long time. The drama goes on for long. And for the first time, he was thinking, I have to go and see the results. But you are in Bhagwan's presence, but all the while thinking about the results. The moment the darshan got over, he runs to the hostel. There were a few vessels which were kept in front of the notice board. It was summer course time. He mounted on all those vessels, pushed a few of them down in the process, and was looking at the notice board, and he was looking at his name and then the marks. He just needed to see one mark, which was the accountancy. He knew he would pass everything else. He did this, he did that, and then saw a mark which he couldn't really believe. And he did this because for a brief moment, he thought it's a parallax error. In physics, you talk of parallax errors. And he said, no, there is something not okay. But he did this again. And this time he had done, maker checker. He had checked it twice. So he had to actually believe that it is true. But he really couldn't believe it because, dear brothers and sisters, you know what the score for accountancy was? It was 96. Remember, he wrote for only 4 marks, which he knew was right. The other 96 was confirmed as wrong. He got 96. And the icing on the cake is he topped accountancy. Interesting part, brothers and sisters. The 4 marks which he wrote correctly, he never got. So that was the only thing which he got right. It's beautiful. And each time he picks up, and a few days before, he'd actually sent a snap of that scorecard saying that, the 96. And that 96 marks is special. The power of prayer. Because actually, I still think that the reason why it really worked is because the real reason why he prayed was not for his own academic success. What was ringing all throughout in his mind is he used to each day go in front of that Ganesha, in front of school, and in front of Swami in the prayer hall and say, Swami, I don't want to bring any bad name to the school, Swami. It's not about my marks. And when you have such intense prayer, I think the full power of prayer is experienced and manifested. And I think that's what happened. And this is one thing which I was blessed to see live. So we talked about the one who is the object of our prayers. We talked about the power of prayer. Let me now move on to the next part, which is the purpose of prayer and my learnings with respect to the purpose of prayer from my experiences. Brother Jayashankar and Brother Siddharth may remember this. Vrindavan in those days, when we would come from Vrindavan to Prashanti Nilayam, we are still, Vrindavan boys are housed in the old hostel, right opposite to the mandir. They have added a few bathrooms now, but in those days, it was an extremely unfavorable students to bathroom ratio because you had few bathrooms and we used to sleep in the mandir in those days at night because there was not enough space for all the boys to sleep in the old hostel. Morning, we would be woken up with a gentleman who would snap his fingers and then we would rush. What I would do is, for me, coming from Kerala, I could miss a meal, but I can't miss a bath. It was unthinkable for me. So going for darshan without bath. So what I would do is wake up at about 3:30 in front of the mandir and then go and quickly have my bath. But then, Swami in those days would come out for darshan at about 6:15, 6:30. But what I would do is now you can't lie down and sleep because you've had your bath. I would sit and sleep. Now, it was one of those days where I was sitting and I was sleeping, and I had one of the most wonderful, if I may use a terminology, HD quality dreams of my life. Bhagavan often tells us that if it is really a dream which he has built, it'll be clear. That's one thing which he told us in Prashanti Nilayam. It'll be crystal clear. It'll not be vague images and all that. It was crystal clear. Swami was sitting in our ancestral home in Thrissur in Kerala. And, that was the home where all the brothers who together had gone to see him, that home where they used to stay together. So quite appropriately, Swami came in their ancestral home. He was sitting in one of those rooms which had, an open skylight kind of a thing and has had a great mix of light and darkness. And I'm sharing all this with you so you can picture that beautiful form sitting there. He was sitting on a normal old wooden chair, nothing very fancy. And, beautiful interplay of light and darkness was painting a wonderful picture on his face. It was delightful to see Swami there, the mix of light and darkness. And the sunlight was doing magic with his hair. So I was standing somewhere on the side. There were a few of other relatives who were standing. Bhagavan just summoned me and he said, "What are you going to sing today?" And when I said, "What are you going to sing today?" Again, for apparently no reason, I told Swami, Manumandir mein aavo giridhari. Now that's not, I wouldn't say that was one of my, there's some bhajans which we want to sing again and again. This is not one of them. So, I just told him, I have no clue why I told him what I told him. So I said, Swami, Manumandir mein aavo giridhari. And you know what happened? As though to figure out which bhajan I'm talking about, Swami sings a particular line to figure out which bhajan it is. But interestingly, Swami does not sing the first line. Swami does not sing, Man mandir mein aavo giridhari. But instead what Swami does is, the moment I say, Swami Man mandir mein aavo giridhari, Swami lifts his head like this and says, Nisadina barisat nayan hamare. And then he says, okay, sing this bhajan. Now, when I look back at this experience, the line which Swami is underlining is Nisadina barisat nayan hamare. And it is then that I got my first clue as to what the purpose of prayer should be. The purpose of prayer, O Swami, should be only to be connected with you. And connected with you day and night. Nisa dina barisat nayana hamari. And what should I be crying for? What should I be craving for as part of my prayer, Swami? The only thing that I should be craving for is you. Because once we crave for you, everything else comes along. But the interesting part is when other things come along, it no longer matters because you've experienced you. That I think is the story of everybody. But to tell you a quick sequel of that story, there's a technical problem with this bhajan. It's an Avo bhajan. Mandir mein Avo Giridhari. And in those days, the tradition is you never sing an Avo bhajan because you're sitting in Swami's physical presence. But Swami had told me this in his dream. And there was no, and you can sing this only if you get the second or third bhajan in those days. Not a very high probability for a singer of my stature in those days. So I go there. Suddenly I find my bhajan is the second that day. I don't know how. And beloved Mohan Rao sir in those days, some of us would remember, he put my name as second. And then I hesitate and say, can I sing Manumandir mein Avo Giridhari? Because Swami told me in the dream. But then they say, it's an Avo bhajan. And I'm hesitating because how do you tell people I got Swami's dream? But luckily, a senior of mine, he says, BRC, you got some dream or something? And then I confess saying, yes, brother. But it was so beautiful. All the brethren got together. See, they respected it so much. They accepted it immediately and said, okay, let's do something. Have Mata Maheshwari Tribhuvana Janani as a backup bhajan. And you have this as the main bhajan. And he said, if Bhagwan walks in before you start, then you sing Mata Maheshwari. But after you've started singing, if Swami walks in, it's okay. That's accepted because you said Avo and Swami has walked in. So it's okay. So just imagine, brothers and sisters, till the actual bhajan started, the harmonium player and me were both prepared for both bhajans. And actually had both written. The only time in the history of Prashanthalini Bhajan Group, I think we both were written against one singer. And those days, Swami would come in immediately after Ganesha or during the progress of the Ganesha Bhajan. But that day, dear brothers and sisters, Swami waited for entire Ganesha to get over. Swami waited for my bhajan to start. Manumandir Avo Giridhari happened. And after all that, Bhagwan walked in. So that was an interesting sequel, And when Swami tells you, he's really, that's one more confirmation for you that he's really, really willed it. But the biggest takeaway for me was the fact that, the only purpose of prayer is to be connected to Bhagwan. Let me quickly add one more experience here. When I got my opportunity to speak before Bhagwan for the first time in Trey Vrindavan, and after I'd finished my speech and I had took namaskar. Now you feel like asking Swami something. But what happens is when you're with the divine and when you're connected with the divine, irrespective of who you are, you might be the iron and the thief's dagger, like the song of the Devadasi. The iron and the thief's dagger, you are that muddied lake, but it doesn't matter because the moment you come in touch with the philosopher's stone, you turn into gold, at least for those few moments. And the only thing I could ask Bhagwan at that point of time is, the only thing I could say is, I said, Swami, let us be devoted to you throughout our life. That's all that you could ask. And later on, once when I got the opportunity to read Narada Bhakti Sutra, because Narada is the authority when it comes to, the senior professor when it comes to Bhakti. You always talk about Narada. Narada talks about a beautiful concept there. We normally talk about, we talk about desirelessness. Yeah. So which is Nishkama, correct? Nishkama. But Narada talks about a different concept called Sampurna Kama. Now, Nishkama is when you've given up desires. But Sampurna Kama is not you giving up desires, but desires giving you up. Like the leaves fall off from a tree, desires just fall away. And when does that happen? It happens when you've experienced the greatest of all sweetness. In fact, Brother Jaishankar and Siddharth may possibly remember this song we would sing before Swami. तेरी प्यार में ही मिलती है हर चाहत की बहार हमें हर चाहत की बहार हमें हम तेरे हैं साये हम तेरे हैं. So in those beautiful moments, when you say, Swami, I have touched you, there's no other desire can touch me after that, because at that moment, you feel completely full, like a person who's had a big meal and you can't take anything more. You have absolutely no desire. And thus, that experience taught me that the only purpose of prayer is to feel completely connected to the Lord. You can ask him for anything, it doesn't matter. But when you're connected to the Lord, what happens is either you get what you want or you get the wisdom as to why you shouldn't be asking. One of this is delivered, but that happens when you're connected to him. And that I felt is the purpose of prayer. I'm in 7:25, I'm conscious of time. I think I've got 15 minutes more, brother, right? So 7:40 you said, I'll stick to that time. Let me move to the last part, which is the process of prayer. And let me share 2 or 3 quick experiences here. When I joined Bhagwan's institution, I must tell you a little bit of autobiographical detail here. I was the first grandchild in a joint family where about 16 people would live in the home together. And being the first grandchild, I had a disproportionate share of everybody's attention. I was the first person who left hometown to actually study. And when I landed up in Vrindavan, away from parents and the love of everybody around me, I thought that what I was missing there would be more than fulfilled by the physical proximity of Bhagwan and Bhagwan's physical attention. A lot of people had told me that Bhagwan speaks to every student, and I had naively believed it. Physically, how would Swami speak to everybody? But that's what I thought. I thought every student would be spoken to by Bhagwan. But then when I came and I joined Bhagwan's Institute in Vrindavan, I realized, no, that's not the case. And those were very difficult times because on one side, I was missing parental affection, the affection of all around me. On the other side, Bhagwan was supposed to fill in that role, didn't seem to be doing his job. And it was a very, very painful kind of feeling. But over a period of time, through many experiences, of course, which I will not get into at this point of time, I realized that my path was to seek and try and establish, connect with the Lord within. And that's when, like Brother Jaishankar said, the Bhajan Antaranga Sai became very special. It became very special because I felt that I have to look for my Swami within. I felt that the external Swami was not for me. I felt that I really didn't have a claim on him. There are many times I would go to the one corner of the hostel and cry and singing Antaranga Sai. And somewhere, I would feel that I could be possessive about the Swami inside my heart because that Swami belongs only to me. And at the same time, there was one available for everybody else. And hence I would not be infringing on anybody else's access to Swami. So it was a very, dharmic way of, trying to lay claim on Swami. And over a period of time, I reconciled to this saying, yes, my Swami is a Swami within. And that was, kind of filling the void. But, it is very difficult. You place a beautiful sweet in front of you and say that you must experience it only inside and not with your tongue. I mean, it's very difficult. Here was beautiful Swami walking around, speaking to everybody, touching everybody. And then he didn't seem to do any of that with me. And one of those days I was feeling very bad. It was Vijayadashimi day, a day very special because I had grown up always with the Rama I knew. Because Rama was the form of the Lord, the form of Swami, which I had grown up with right as a child. And it was a day special to Lord Rama. And and Swami to me, Rama to me was Swami. Okay. Rama to me was, Rama came from Swami, if I would look at it differently. He is the Adipurusha from which all incarnations came. And for me, Swami and Rama were synonymous. And I felt very bad that day. There was a program going on. The famous singer Sushila Amma was giving a performance. I was sitting in the audience in Sai Ramesh Hall. Swami was seated in our midst, so close to me, but yet far away. So close, yet so far. That's what divine romance is all about. He's so near, but then you have no access to him. You are supposed to just manage with Antaranga Sai. And what happens is that Bhagwan is there. Somewhere I feel that, Swami, you've never blessed me by, touching my head. And then one part of my mind is telling me, saying, no, you should not be selfish. Don't trouble Swami like this. You okay? Make do with your Antaranga Sai. And there's this war going on in my mind. But that day I just couldn't control. And there was real craving, to receive that blessing. The program gets over. Bhagwan just stands up. He randomly, with an inverted commas, cuts a path. And by now, with Swami, there's nothing random. He cuts a path. And as he cuts the path and as he walks towards the stage and as he gets closer, I suddenly realize that this time also there's no parallax error. Bhagwan was actually exactly had cut the path where I would be on the edge of the path. And as Bhagwan starts walking towards me, he does something doing very interesting. Till then, Bhagwan is walking very, naturally. And there's a lot of space, to be fair, around him. Suddenly, as he nears me, Bhagwan feels the need to take support to walk and starts holding on to the hands of boys. And exactly as he passes me, he takes my support, but this time not by holding my hand, but by placing his divine hand on my head. And I was in bliss. And something? He doesn't even look at me when he does this. It was a little secret. Again, the Antaranga Sai, who would not look at me, not smile at me, but then he had silently blessed me and walked away. And I was in real bliss. And what taught me that day, what I learned that day, is that powers has the power of prayer. Prayer has got great potential, and to manifest the power of prayer, there's one essential ingredient, which is craving. So if I realize that if my prayer doesn't work, the problem is not with the prayer. The problem is the level of craving. I just need to up it. And I think if you're hungry enough, if you're thirsty enough, I think it does work 100%. And each time, I get lazy about prayers, I try and think about that day, because it was a wonderful experience. It just worked instantly. It was so beautiful. It worked so predictably. And there was one other time, and this prayer was still burning in my heart. And I remember we had 3 or 4 of us who used to work in the cooperative stores as volunteers, and Brother Jaishankar himself has done that. We had got an opportunity to go inside 3 to do some cutting work of some fabric so that Swami could distribute white safari to the Sevadals. We had all been given opportunity to hold the the bundle of clothes while Swami would distribute it, and I was sent to do my bit of it. So again, brothers and sisters would request you to visualize Trey Brindavan, the pathway as you enter the gate, Sevadals on both sides, Bhagwan walking along that path and distributing, I facing my back to the gate and walking backwards. I am 5 feet 11. Bhagwan is 5 feet 3 inches without hair, as he clarifies every time. And I have to now bend down so that Bhagwan can comfortably reach the cloth. Bhagwan is distributing, and when my turn came, he did something very mischievous. What he did is, he did not pull the cloth which is on top. We had kept it as sets, neatly. Swami pulls the second one. Now, Swami shouldn't be pulling the second one because the first one will topple. Now, I can't do anything because my hands are this way. And helplessly, I see Swami pulling the second one. And it was very, very deliberate. You can make out. He's looking at me and pulling out the second one. Now, what happens? The bundle topples on his divine lotus feet. And I immediately kind of pick it up. The moment I do that, he gives me a mischievous smile, looks at me and gives me one whack on my head and says, Dunapotu, which means he buffalo, as he clarifies. So I became a certified buffalo from then, his own buffalo. But it was so beautiful. I was praying for this opportunity where he would kind of bless me. Again, dear listener, this story is not about me. The story about the Lord who does this, And again, I realized that what adds or what helps us manifest the power of prayer is craving. Let me come to the last part of what I have to share. I've got 5 minutes, so I'll share one more bit. One more thing which I think is critical with prayer, which I learned through what Bhagwan has told us and the experiences which Bhagwan has given, is faith. Now, it's interesting. I once heard Bhagwan mention in a discourse that all these boys think that first they must have a miraculous experience in their life and then they will have faith. But Swami says, no, it's not like that. First faith and then experience. It's not first experience and then faith. First faith and then experience. I heard it for the first time. It sounded very counterintuitive. I mean, how can you actually have faith and then an experience? But then I realized that it is not actually very counterintuitive. Let me give you a parallel. Dear brothers and sisters, suppose you want to pick up a restaurant today in Kav Gali. Let me throw in a little bit of Bombay for you guys. Now, how do you pick up a restaurant you have never been to? You read reviews, right? Now, question for us to ponder about is, do we know who has written the review? No. Do we know their credentials? No. But we read what they have read and we form a hypothesis, don't we, about the restaurant? Now, the hypothesis is a form of faith. Yeah, it's just that it's not experiential faith, but it's faith gained out of listening to something. So currently, that's what is happening, right? You listen to samarpans and satsangs. Basically, what happens is that here is somebody who's basically saying, I've been there, I've done it, it's very nice. Yeah. So, and then what happens is that hypothesis gives you the enthusiasm and motivation to actually take the effort to go there and experience the restaurant. And that experience gives you that real faith. But if you see, faith came first and then you got yourself the experience and then you have stronger faith. So Swami was right, as always. Faith first and then experience next. So I think faith the hypothesis that Swami, it will work. And always in my life, and I will not get into experiences now because we don't have time on hand, but there are a couple of experiences where at those moments, if I replay in my mind, I think what was really powerful there was a fact that I had absolutely no doubt in my mind that it will work. And I think that's when the power of prayer gets manifested to the maximum extent. One ingredient is craving. Second ingredient is that, that 100% strong hypothesis that this is going to work. And I think that's where Samarpan and all these satsangs help. Because somewhere, if it has happened there, it must work here too. And I'm saying very practically, I think that's how Samarpans really, really help. So let me go to the last part, which is the format. Brother, I think I'll exceed by 5 minutes. Are you okay? So 45, I'll stop.
Go till 7:50 also in case you want to.
Okay, no, I'll respect the time, Samarpan timelines you have laid out. Let me go to the last part, which is about the format of prayer. Now, this is one lesson which I learned through a beautiful experience, which I believe is a lesson which Bhagwan is still trying to teach me. So this, to give you a little bit of background to it, I work with a bank, and I'm not sure whether the brief had the name of the bank, but that's okay. So I work for a bank, and I've been working with this bank right from the time I finished my studies in Bhagwan's college. In those days, what would happen is that a lot of us who would, work in the bank, including Brother Jaishankar was a part of that group, we would go together to Prashanti Nilayam, group of students. You would just need an excuse to go and have darshan, and you would go together. And it was wonderful to go with all brothers who work in the same organization. And Brother Jaishankar was part of this. So it's interesting to recount this experience in the presence of somebody who was part of it, but yet didn't know he was a part of it. So a few days before we were supposed to go, I get again one of those HD quality dreams. There are very few which I get. Dreams are not something which normally happens to me, but then this was one of them which happened. It was crystal clear. And what do I see in the dream? I see myself in the interview room in Prashanti Nilayam, Bhagwan seated on the chair. And those of you who've had the great opportunity to be inside the interview room, you know the chair that's there, the peacock chair. And then I sitting down on the floor. So Bhagwan looks at me and Bhagwan asks me, saying that, where do you work? And then I say, Swami, I work for a bank. And then he very sweetly, innocently, Swami says, so when you say bank, what do you do in a bank? And then Swami holds his hands up. I'm describing this to you because it was that crystal clear. Swami sweetly holds his hands up as though it's a ledger, an account book. And he says, so what do you do? You write accounts and all that? Swami actually asks me. So now what do you tell Swami? So I said, Swami, and I'm busy trying and help Swami understand what a banker does and what I do in the bank. And I tell Swami, I am a branch manager, because when this happened, I was a branch manager in the bank. And the moment I say I'm a branch manager, Swami is swelling with motherly pride. He says, oh, you're a branch manager. He says, very good, very good, very good. And then immediately what Swami says is, he suddenly switches topic and says, you sing, right? And I say, Swami, yes, I sing. And immediately he says, why don't you sing? And the moment he says, why don't you sing? I see Swami in a pose where I've never seen, physically. He just gets off his chair. He squats on the floor right in front of the chair. And suddenly what happens is he does this. And when he does this, he suddenly pulls in a harmonium. I don't know from where, okay? But he pulls in a harmonium. And he immediately says, what are you going to sing? Now, I've already narrated an experience earlier when he asked me, what are you going to sing? And each time Bhagwan seems to have this uncanny ability to draw out of my mouth what he wants. So this time again, I talk about a song which is not really top of mind, not even one of my favorites, etc. But I say, Swami, I will sing Teri Hai Zameen, Tera Asaman, which is, an old song. And that's a song which, many of us brothers, we have had this wonderful opportunity of sitting at his feet and singing this song. So I say, Swami, I will sing this. Swami says, okay, sing. And you know what happens? Swami keeps the Shruti. And I still remember, brothers, it was crystal clear in the dream. Swami actually plays the lead line like a good harmonium player so that I can start. I still remember Swami plays na 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 na. Okay, and then I start singing. Teri hai zameen, tera asman, tu bada mehirban, tu bakshish kar, sabhi ka hai tu, सभी तेरे, खुदा mere tu bakshish kar. Now my brothers here will remember the next stanza is actually तेरी मर्जी से है मालिक हम इस दुनिया में आए हैं. But funnily, in the dream, when I sing this bhajan, after I sing the zero stanza, Teri hai zameen tera asman, for apparently no reason, I directly start singing the last stanza. And the last stanza is, Tu chahe to hame mare, tu chahe to hame rakhe, tere hi haath se sai, हमारे भाग है लिखे. तू चाहे तो हमें मारे, तू चाहे तो हमें रखे, तेरे ही हाथ से साई हमारे भाग है लिखे. Now, I was not conscious of the meaning of these lines at that point of time. But one thing I remember very clearly during the dream was, Swami was only playing harmonium till then. But the moment the stanza "Tu chahe to hame mare, tu chahe to hame rakhe" started, dear brothers and sisters, I see a wonderful sight. I see Bhagwan swaying from side to side and singing these lines along with me, as though to underscore these lines. The best thing is he never sang the previous stanza, okay? He sang only this one. And along with me, Bhagwan is singing, "Tu chahe to hame mare, तू चाहे तो हमें रखे, तेरे ही हाथ से साई हमारे भाग है लिखे." As though to underline these lines, as though to say, Swami, it's okay if you hit me, that's okay. You want to cuddle me, that's okay. You want to protect me, you want to thrash me, anything is okay. But whatever it is, Swami, tere hi haath se sai hamare bhag hai likhe. May that script of my life be written by your hands. It doesn't matter what the part of the script, but let it be written by your hands. And I didn't figure out the meaning at that point of time. And exactly at that, what happened is after that, Bhagwan, he was very happy, and he got up and said, very good, very good, very good. And then suddenly Bhagwan gets up and he creates Vibhuti. And now Bhagwan was all smiles and then is very serious, very serious expression. And then he says, open your mouth. And I open my mouth. And then Swami drops the Vibhuti down. And the angle at which I was, if you can visualize, I can actually see the Vibhuti falling. The strange thing is there were some golden crystals in that Vibhuti. God knows what it is. I mean, only Swami knows what it is. So there was some golden, it was so clear. It falls into my mouth, onto my tongue. And there are different kinds of Vibhuti that I've had tasted. I've even tasted Vibhuti, which tastes like paracetamol, which I once got when I got fever. But this was sweet. The moment it touched my tongue, it was sweet. And in that sweetness, I woke up. And it was early in the morning, it must be Brahma Muhurtam time. And early in the morning, I just wake my wife up and say, I saw Swami, I saw Swami. And brothers and sisters, the most, unbelievable thing, mind-boggling thing, gives me goosebumps even when I think about it now, is the sweetness was still there on my tongue. I mean, it was as though the line between the waking and the dream states were completely collapsed, and I could feel the sweetness on my tongue. But I just couldn't figure what the meaning of that was. But what happened after that is, immediately after that, I went through the most difficult period in my career, where for absolutely no reason, I went through unbelievable amount of difficulty. But each time I went through that difficult path, that line would come back to my mind. Tu chahe to hame mare, tu chahe to hame rakhe, tere hi haath se sai hamare bhag hai likhe. And then when I went to Parthi for the first time, and of course, miraculously, Swami's own magic, everything got okay. And when I went to Parthi, last minute, I was not supposed to be part of the group which was supposed to sing, but suddenly somebody pushed me into one of those groups and said, just join this song. And typical of Parthi, you know what song you're going to sing only 1 minute before. And what am I supposed to sing? Teri hai zameen, tera asmaan. And Swami is looking at me, and there was a glance exchanged, and only both of us understood what that glance meant. And then it became a pattern. Every time in my life, just before I would go through a rough patch, this song would manifest out of nowhere, and strangely it would manifest. I would not get into those details because that's a story of its own. But suddenly one time it manifests in a Brindavan, a song teaching session, which was normally supposed to happen on a Friday, but was kept miraculously waiting till the Saturday where I land up there to do a session. And all the brothers there are very surprised because that day they are playing the song, teaching the song, and they were also planning to play my narration of this experience, which I just narrated to you with Radio Sai. And they had no clue I was coming. And immediately I come back, starts one more rough patch. After some time, to be truthful, brothers and sisters, I hear this song, I would get nervous. But then I realized it is stupidity because I was getting it all wrong. Sometimes, and there are a lot of brothers and sisters, your devotees, you have been with Swami for long. I don't know whether you've been through this, thought, but have you seen this phenomenon? It appears that till you come to this Swami, everything seems to be hunky-dory in your life. But the moment you come to the Swami, it suddenly appears as though your problems multiply. So, tu chahe to hame mare seems to be working more. And I was once speaking to a devotee in Chennai who gave a beautiful explanation to this, which answered this to me. And the explanation was this. He was in Africa when he got the same doubt and was hesitant to join the Sai organization because the track record seemed to say that you become part of the Sai organization and you come to the Swami, your troubles will multiply. So very hesitantly, he goes to one of those elderly Sai devotees there and says, sir, please don't mind me asking this. Is it true that if I become a member of the Sri Satya Sai organization, my troubles will multiply, a lot of troubles will come into my life? And that elderly Sai devotee smiles and says, brother, I don't think you're looking at it correctly. He says, it is not that troubles have come into your life because Swami has come into your life. It is not that troubles have come into your life because Swami has come into your life. It is because troubles are going to come into your life that Swami has chosen to come in so that he can see you through the trouble. Now, that's a very different perspective. Just think about it. It's like a pilot almost telling you you're going to go through turbulence. Merciful Lord saying, you want to go through turbulence? Don't worry, I'll take care. Well, that was my tu chahe to hami mare, tu chahe to hami rakhe. Tere hi haath se sai. It's like saying, no, don't worry. It's my script, okay? You're safe. We have got everything covered. Where will you find a Lord like that? And that's when, the format of prayer, which I again borrowed from Sri Ramakrishna. It's okay to pray to the Lord. I think till such time we are feeling like asking anything to anybody else, we might as well ask to the Lord. But I think an interesting part to add is by saying Sri Ramakrishna would go to the Divine Mother, who I believe is our Swami only, and would go and say, oh Mother, can't you please do this? And would say, however, Mother, in the end, you may do whatever is your will. What a beautiful format of a prayer. One side you pray because it's important to pray. At the same time, you're also saying, Swami, but in the end, no. Tu chahe to hame mare, tu chahe to hame rakhe, tere hi haath se sai, hamare bhag hai likhe. With these words, I offer everything that I've said at Swami's lotus feet. I hope you'll completely forget the narrator. I hope you'll completely forget the narrative. I hope you'll only remember the one who is the recipient and the object of all our prayers. I hope you will only ruminate on the power of prayer. I only hope that you'll think about the process of prayer, the craving which makes prayer so powerful, the faith which makes prayer so powerful. And I only hope that while we pray, we'll remember to pray hard, but at the same time, leave everything as a lotus feet and praying to Swami that Swami, whatever you throw, may I accept it as your prasadam. Jai Sai Ram. So sorry, brother, 7:50, taking a lot of time extra.
No, you're absolutely bang on. I think we thought about 7:50. In fact, we didn't want this session to end, to be honest. But anyway, time is there, so we have to end it. But fine, it was absolutely brilliant session. I think the fact that there are hardly any questions as yet, it just shows that probably you answered all the questions which people had. And this is the story which we have been seeing. This is a 26th session. So all past 25 sessions, whatever you narrated, most of the questions hovered around those topics only. But I think some key takeaways that we should, as a Sai family, we should take is first and foremost is Deepavali, and Deepavali is a time when Rama entered Ayodhya, and you actually have helped us to connect to our Sai Rama today on this auspicious Deepavali, and he has genuinely entered our heart. In fact, you can see the chair just behind me. There was tremendous fragrance over last 6, 10, 15 minutes. I'm not lying. I'm just in front of the chair, and it's been tremendous. His presence is felt across. And on this auspicious day, some of the key messages are very, very simple and clear. That first and foremost, when we pray, craving and faith is paramount for us. Absolutely, I think most of us would have gone through bits and pieces of our experience, and this is a good opportunity to introspect. When our prayers apparently may not be answered, is not with prayer, it's about our craving and whether we have faith that He's listening to our prayers. So absolutely, these 2 points are very important takeaway for us. And I think overarching thing is we need to connect with Bhagwan. I think that is the best form of prayer. The ultimate purpose, as you said, to connect with our Lord is the best form of prayer. And this is anywhere and everywhere we can do. There is no limitation that we have to sit in a puja room. We can be in an aircraft, or we can be in a kitchen, we can be in the living room, we can be in office, and you are connected to Bhagwan, your life becomes a prayer. So that's another beautiful, key takeaway that we all can, imbibe and ruminate over it. And the ultimate thing is, I think all of us are extremely blessed that we have got Kalparuksh in our life, if I may use the word, because I think all your initial experiences, which you narrated about your mother and brother, I think Swami can do anything. There is nothing that he cannot, leave out. Anything and everything he can do. And you have somebody like him who is, nothing short of Kalparuksh. You pray with your faith and craving, and he delivers. Even apparently we feel if it is not delivered, he knows what is good for us, which is what exactly you summed up in the end, that as Ramakrishna himself prayed, that whatever mother you decide what is good for us, it's good for us. Whether it is as per my wish or not, doesn't matter. But whatever you think that is good for us, absolutely. So, this is probably the most timely, the one of the scintillating sessions, a very blissful sessions that we have got today. Tremendous learning for us with strong experiences that you gave. And these messages are, I think not once, I think most of us will probably watch this video several times, imbibe, ruminate, and complete that process which Swami says, Shravanam, Mananam, Nididhyasam, so that it becomes part of our lives. Absolutely brilliant. So heartfelt gratitude on behalf of entire Sai family, not just Mumbai. Mumbai is just you can say somebody who has to anchor it. So that's why Mumbai is anchoring, but this session is being heard and watched by across the people across the world. And more so today, brother, it is end of, after the Akhand Bhajan that we had. And this is Bhagwan's grace that you have, he brought you onto the forum today. Because as you were singing those bhajans, we are able to connect with the global Akhand Bhajans also, which we just experienced. So the meaning of prayer, the bhava that we need to have with, when we sing, and absolutely it's, timing is perfect. It only happens when Bhagwan's grace is there. So we are completely soaked into this blissful session. On behalf of entire Sai family across the world, we offer a heartfelt gratitude to you, brother, for coming over, sharing your experiences, and making us connect directly with Bhagwan heart to heart, which is the ultimate purpose of prayer. So that's from all of us. But before we end, there are few, now we can see start, some requests coming, not questions. In fact, 2 or 3 people have asked, can you sing Antaranga Sai Bhajan for all of us?
Yes, brother. And if can I also sing a 2-minute verse? Is that okay?
Sure.
Something else, because it's Diwali, and you said Diwali just triggered my mind.
Sure.
Sing that, and possibly I'll conclude with Antaranga Sai. So one of the, if I have to sum up my entire life and experiences with Bhagwan with one bhajan alap, I would pick this. And it's got 2 parts to it. The first part is a question, and the second one is the answer. हर पल हर क्षण भूल करे हम पग पग तो कर खाए, एक पग आगे दो पग पीछे साई, तुम तक कैसे आए. Now this is one audience which doesn't need translation for this line. You know, each step I take forward, my experience in my life is I go one step behind. But then the answer to the question, oh Swami, how did I still reach you? I think is in the second part of the stanza. Karuna Sagar Parama Dayalu Sai. Because the Lord is the ocean of compassion. And you know what the Shastras refer to as Ahetuka Daya Sindhu, you know, who does not require a purpose. Just like it's the sun's nature to shine, it's his nature to shower grace. He requires no reason. Ahetuka Daya Sindhu. And I was reminded about this brother because, you know, on the Diwali day many years ago, our own Swami in Shirdi, when the traders in Shirdi refused to give him oil, decided to pick up water, and then he lit lamps. And I was just thinking as you spoke these words, brother, how does it matter that we are ordinary water? Doesn't, because the moment you receive the touch of his hand, you become oil, which can actually fuel light. Because, you know, it's not about, somehow I think if we can't achieve the highest goal of life in this birth, nobody else can. Because we have seen him and we have touched him. It's not because I'm confident of my love for Swami. I don't think I have unshakable faith in my love for Swami, but I think, you know, all of us have unshakable faith in Swami's love for us. No, we'll let him go, but he will not. So thanks so much for reminding me about that. I'll conclude with the bhajan Antaranga Sai. So sorry about the noise. Let me try and use the Shruti for this. Antaranga Sai, Anatanath Sai, Antaranga Sai, Anatanath Sai, Deenabandhu Sai, Karuna Sindhu Sai, Deenabandhu Sai, Karuna Sindhu Sai, Antaranga Sai, Anatanath Sai, Rama Krishna Shiva Shakti Prema Rupa Sai, Rama Krishna Shiva Shakti Prema Rupa Sai, Yugavatar Baba Shri Satya Sai, Yugavatar Baba Shri Satya Sai, Antaranga Sai, Anatanath Sai.
Absolutely brilliant. I think, I don't know, even should we speak after this bhajan, or let everybody be completely silenced and be soaked in the bliss? But beautiful. I think, again, one last piece before we conclude is your name has Ramachandra. You know, we can keep saying coincidence. It is coincidence where Ramachandra himself spoke about the divine Sai Rama story on the auspicious Deepavali. So heartfelt gratitude to beloved Bhagwan for giving us this opportunity to think about him, soak in his glory, in his beautiful stories, and get it connected to him. So with this, let's close the session today with Samasta Loka. Loving Sai Rams.
समस्तलोका सुखिनो भवन्तु, समस्तलोका सुखिनो भवन्तु, समस्तलोका सुखिनो भवन्तु. शांति शांति शांति. जय बोलो भगवान श्री सत्य साई बाबा जी की जय। जय श्री राम।